Okay, today actually we discuss chapter 6, which is regarding the demand and supply in the labor market. Okay, last two chapters develop the demand side of the economy, where we take the price level P as exogenously determined. So now that this is the product market equilibrium condition, like the IS, Y is equal to C is the function of Y minus dy plus IR plus G, and then this is the money market equilibrium condition, LM. M by P is equal to LR plus KY. These are the two equations that determine the equilibrium values of the level of output Y and the interest rate for any given level of price P. And now if we change the price level P, okay, it change the equilibrium level income Y and R through the changes in the real money supply. That means M is equal to M bar by P. Now graphically you can see this effect comes through the shift in the LM curve. Okay, next slide we will see that one. Varying the exogenous P assumption gives us the economist demand curve, which we can see in the next slide. We discuss, okay, and then this chapter discuss mainly the supply side by introducing demand and supply in the labor market. Why? Because in order to develop the equilibrium in this labor market. Okay, let's see in the next slide. Now we discuss the simple depression model. So first we look for the moment at an economy such as that of the depression in 1930s. The labor supply is more or less unlimited that time, so that a demand decrease can expand output Y and employment N without raising the price level. This essentially gives us as a supply curve a horizontal line at P0. You can see in this figure 6.1 with the equilibrium output Y0 and then the price level P0. We can next introduce a short run production function for real output where Y is the function of N and K. That means this is the labor and this is the capital, and then this is delta Y by delta N is greater than 0. This simply you can see from here that in the short run the level of real output Y depends on the labor input N only. All other factors including the capital, okay, are either fixed in the short run like the capital stock or vary in direct proportion to labor input like material input. For any given level of the output, the production function gives the level of employment N needed to produce this level of income. This gives us a complete, if somewhat unsatisfactory, depression model. The presence of the massive unemployment means that a demand decrease can increase output and employment without pulling up the wage and prices to any significant degree. This situation is represented, by this figure, like the supply curve at P0. And this supply curve, you can see that it is horizontal supply curve. Production of the resulting equilibrium output Y0 gives employment to N0 person in figure 6.2. You can see in the next slide. Okay, this situation actually represented by the horizontal supply curve at P0, which you can see in this figure 6.1. Okay, production of the resulting equilibrium output Y0, it gives the employment N0. You can see in this figure 6.2. Like this is the the income Y0 and then employment level N0, and this employment level is far less than the total labor force. Okay, in this case, if the government purchase were increased, the IS curve will be shift out, and the demand curve of this figure 6.1, it would be shift from D1 to D2. You can see in this figure 6.3. Equilibrium output would rise to then Y0 to Y1, and then employment will be rise N0 to N1. You can see in this figure 6.2. Now, we go to the next slide. Okay, if the government purchase were increased, the IS curve would shift out and the demand curve of the, last figure 6.1 would shift to, D1 to D2. Now, you can see that formally, this depression model adds to the exogenous, price assumption where we can see that P is equal to, P0. So now we can go back to the equation 1 to 3 to form a four equation system in four variable y, r, p and y. Okay, so the main difficulty, okay, with this analysis is that the assumption of a fixed price level is not acceptable if labor supply is not perfectly elastic. We know that this is the from the our previous or empirical observation. Okay, in the 1930s when widespread unemployment prevailed, an increase in the demand could have expanded production without resulting in the so much price increase. Even after 1961, if you know the history, when unemployment was about 7%, okay, in USA, demand increases expanded output without causing much of the increase in price. Now, again, if you look at the after 1965, however, when the employment was below 4%, the continued expansion of the demand brought a rise in prices that continued until the early 1970s. This is the case where demand expansion pulled the prices up. And then later in 1980s, it is you can see that the demand reduction ending and inflation. Monetary policy, which was aimed at cutting demand, it reduced reduce the output, okay, from 1980 to 1982, and the unemployment rate increased from 6 to 10.5%, and the inflation rate, which had been pushed up to 11.5% by 1980, it followed a series of supply shock. More on this later. It fell to 4% by the end of the 1982. Thus, the empirical record from the previously, you can see that increasing demand leads to rising price and then reduction in the demand. Actually, it shows the inflation or and reduce the price level. Now we discuss the next thing. Okay, now we would be able to imagine the qualitative relationship between price, wage, and the level of employment that would occur when an economy is at or near the full employment. If the demand for goods should suddenly rise above the available supply, prices would begin to rise, and then higher prices would mean increased profit for the producer. And then when they earn more profit, they can expand their production in order to make even more profit. To do so, they would try to hire more labor. Then you can see that higher prices would lead to an increased demand for labor. The increased demand for labor would take the form of employment, offering higher monetary wages to hire more labor. Now, however, workers are interested in the purchasing power of their wages, what they can buy with their income. So, what do you mean by the purchasing power? It indicates that how much they can buy with their income. What they can buy depends not only on the level of the money wages but also on the price of the goods and services. Thus, as increase in the price would lower the real wage earned by the worker and might cause a reduction in the supply of labor offered at a given money wage. Another way to look at this is that the effect of an increase in the demand for labor, it stimulated by an increase in the price level, is likely to be dampened by the reduction in labor supply, which caused by the failing real wage. Thus, common sense tells us that there is a close relationship between price, wage, and the level of employment, and that this relationship is more complicated than the simple depression model we discussed just now. Now we go to the next slide. Okay, we already developed the product and money market equation, which is this IS and LM equation. And then in this chapter, we introduce the production function, which is Y is equal to the function of, employment and capital N and K. These three equations have the four endogenous variable, which is Y, R, P, and N. So the system as it stands, is underdetermined. It has fewer equations than the unknown. In order to find the equilibrium solution for Y, R, P, and N, we have to now find another equation that include at least some of these variables and is a bit more sensible than the exogenous P assumption, which we can see the previous slide in the like in equation 4. We will find this equation by looking at a third market, the labor market, that is, and derive from it an aggregate supply curve which relate the price and output on the supply side. Okay, now let's see the labor, the demand for labor.